today we're going to be looking at the new Kontakt Script reference manual. So Kontakt 6 was just released and I'm going to walk through the entire reference manual. Partly as a way for myself to learn this and just to make sure that I really understand what's going on. If you hear my dog walking around in the background, don't worry too much about him. So we're going to start today with the callbacks, the part 2. If you don't know what a callback is, or if you don't know what any of this stuff is, hopefully I can explain it. And if I'm explaining it incorrectly, please leave a comment below. That would help me to, learn and be able to tell it properly. So a callback is basically a function that is created that is being executed at any stage, depending on when you call it. All callbacks start with callback name and end with end on. So you'll see that here. There's the callback name and here's our end, or rather, there's the callback name and there's the end on. Okay. Callbacks can be stopped using command exit. Each callback has a unique ID number, which can also be retrieved, and you can use some of the native instruments callbacks as well in your scripts. So the example script, we can see it starts a function called show callback type, and then it checks, it has a little if loop. So if the native instruments callback type is of a native instruments callback type note, so if I play a note on a MIDI controller, it'll let me know that the function, this function here, showing the callback type, will come from a note, which will print this text to the console through the message function here. And then if that doesn't happen, it will end if, and it will end if, and check if it is in fact a native instruments controller type instead of a note type, and in which case give me the controller feedback from there. So this whole area here is the function. So you'd write all your text, all of your actual command functionality that comes from the function, and down here is where we actually call it. So for instance, if we play a note on note, we call show callback type, which will throw up this function again. Okay, so you see how that works. So even though they're in two different spots in the script, they kind of all work not asynchronously, but they all kind of run at different times that enable them to call around the different parts of the script. So on note, so whenever we play a note, we're going to call the show callback type, okay, which is going to execute show callback type as a function, and then it's going to say, well, if the callback type is a note, in which case this would happen, we would get this message. Okay, so if we this kind of prevents it so that if we play a note, we should see the fact that it sends a note, and if we don't play a note, we shouldn't get that message. Okay, so we'll show that in a second. From there, on the controller, so if I do any control changes, if I pitch bend, modulation, expression, vibrato, anything like that, we're going to again call show callback type, which is going to throw up this function, which is going to check if its callback type is a note, which it won't be. So it will end if and move to the next area, which is going to show callback type controller. Okay, so let's check this out and see how this works. So the other thing that is in here is this on async complete. So this is async is whenever you finish loading or saving. So if you needed something to change whenever you finish loading or saving, like if you wanted to flush some samples out on a load or something like that, you would use on async complete, just the same way you use on controller or on note. So you could do on async complete and call a function and then have its own function callback type be the async complete or checking, something like that, and you would get a message that says function was called from load or save, for instance. Okay, so let's jump into Logic. I'm just going to do this in Logic just because it's really easy to pop open and see how it works. So let's rewrite everything. I think it's always a good idea to rewrite as much as possible, okay, just to get yourself in the habit, on the swing of things. So let's hit New Instrument, and let's open it up and open up the script editor and move to the edit window. Function, what have we got? Show callback type. If native instruments callback type equals native instruments callback type note. Then we're going to print a message. We've got to do the brackets first. Function was called from note callback. Even though this is obviously pretty basic, I think it's a really good idea to write as much of this stuff out as possible, just while you're getting your head around the syntax. You'll notice I'll probably get it wrong a lot of the time, just because I'm still getting used to this programming language. Controller callback. But I think that's a really good idea, just to have a bit of a play and really get your head around how it works. You can use an external text editor for this as well, which is what I probably should be doing, but I'm just going to keep it really, really basic so everyone can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to try and space this stuff out as much as possible, but I'm pretty much going to follow the reference manual because it's made from far smarter people than I, so I should adhere to it as much as possible. So we've built our function here. Now this function could sit anywhere in a patch. I'm going to hit apply. All right, we've got an error. No surprises there. So I've done callback instead of CB type. So it's only going to show me the last error because that's Kontakt for you. So again, look at that. We're learning already. And now that we've applied and everything works, we're not going to actually get any functionality out of this because we're not playing a note and not playing a controller. So if I actually open up the musical typing and hit some notes and change some controller variables, you'll notice that we don't actually get any prints. Nothing actually happens because even though this function exists and it's waiting for callback types and callback type notes, it's not actually going to get them because we're not calling the function. So it's kind of like being at your friend's house. Even though they're inside the house, they don't necessarily come out unless you ring the doorbell, right? So let's write our doorbell sequence in here. So we're going to check on note, call, show callback type, and we get that from up here, show callback type. Okay, and on. So simply enough, this functionality, we're not actually checking anything else about the note. We could say like a note between, you know, C0 and C3 is one callback type and something else. But for this particular script, we're actually just going to get this as basic as possible, and we're just going to show callback type. Show callback type for each of the calls. So let's just check that we've done that right. On note, show callback type. So it's interesting how this is callback, but then later on it's CB. Okay, it's just one of those things. Even here, native instruments callback. I guess it's just a syntactical thing. They're trying to just keep it nice and short. Okay, so if I hit apply and we don't get any errors, now you notice we don't get anything yet. Okay, so if I play a note, we get function was called from note callback. If I play another note, we're going to get that, which is great. It means we've done it correctly. And now if I change some controller values, function was called from controller callback. Okay, so in itself, not that handy yet, but it's our first step into using callbacks. Callbacks are something that you are going to use whenever you learn a new function, whenever you learn a new, whenever you want to implement any new functionality or anything like that. So you should try and dive into them as much as possible.